Welcome to the Faith Science Podcast, episode 19. I'm your host, Jerry Swafford, and on this podcast, we explore the integration of science with faith. Today's guest is an educator for over 40 years and has a great deal of experience teaching Bible classes for middle schoolers. He says that there are three questions that evolutionists can't answer. Where did matter come from? How did life spring forth from inert matter? And where are the missing links? He believes that the public school system should include the creationist perspective in their curricula. Our guest today is Kirk Beck. Kirk, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Jerry. Out here in
It's
California.
so you're in California. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee today. So it's noon here and it's 10 a.m. there. So it's morning for you and it's going into the afternoon for me. I always like to ask my guests at the very beginning if there's something I'm missing or there was something that was off. And when we were about to go on, you were saying that when it comes to the public school system, it's really not your thought that we should try to reform it, but instead we should be focusing more on the kingdom. We should be focusing more on uh, parents having a bigger role in educating their children. So, could you talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about the role of education for children and how apologetics plays a big role in that? But can you talk a little bit about what you mean there about the
Sure.
uh,
Um, I was trained as an engineer.
okay.
I worked for Shell Oil Company. And just prior to that, I'd been in the Army for a short amount of time during the Vietnamization of the Vietnam War. As a second lieutenant, I came out and you couldn't go active duty. Everybody had to go into the reserves. So I fortunately never had to go overseas and engage in violence. That's one thing I'm strongly opposed to. I don't like violence, and I don't like violence in education. And I think public schools do violence to history. Um, Whoever's teaching history, I always told my kids when I was in the public schools, when you're going into the history class, it's your most important class. Who controls the books and who writes the books has a tremendous influence on the culture. As an educator, I put a high value upon history and the importance of telling the whole thing, the good and the bad. And there's plenty of good in America, there's plenty of bad in America. But basically, um, I could bring John Dewey, the great secular humanist educator of the 20th century. I'd put him on the witness stand and I'd ask him, what basically is education? And John Dewey said, and I totally agree, he said that all education is inherently religious. You can't teach history, you can't teach science. You can't even teach, and I taught mathematics most of the time. You can't even teach mathematics without eventually dealing with religion. So um, I believe in separation of church and state. I don't believe the government should be teaching history when it comes from a secular humanist point of view. And I'm sure there's many secular humanists that don't want me teaching it from a Christian point of view. So we've got this constant battle that's going on in the public schools. And I've basically got to the opinion that the best thing for us to do is build the kingdom of God. But that doesn't mean we turn our back on the public schools. I believe we need to watch them and we need to correct them when they're moving away from the truth. And after all, taxpayer money is supporting that. That's my money, that's your money. So we've got to say, and what I've basically found out is we need to use the law. We need to show them where they're violating the law and then hold them accountable. And that's the one big thing that I've got to share with the listeners today.
Okay. Um, let's go ahead and get into that. We'll get to some apologetic stuff for sure later. But so you seem to be you seem to be implying that expressing these worldviews that are opposed to Scripture are against the law? Is that what you're saying?
Uh, a case can be made in certain areas. It's most definitely true. But let me give you an example. I was I was doing some tutoring with a student, and I got to understand that the parents were radically opposed to Donald Trump. Well, I'm not going to argue. I don't like partisan politics, but when I saw the results of the 2020 election, I basically put it to the father of the home. If you knew that that corruption had taken place during the election, and you knew that the person had been defrauded of the election results, you knew that, what would you do about it? And the person remained quiet. Now, I'm pointing out this guy teaches government in the public school system. He's not teaching science, not teaching mathematics, teaching government.
Hmm.
Well, I kept pestering him on this, and he wouldn't answer. I said, well, no, wait a minute. I'm going to give it to you one more time. Look, if corruption took place and somebody lost an election due to fraud, and are you willing to speak out against that? Because if you don't, remember, silence is tacit approval. You're not willing to speak out. When you know personally that corruption had taken place and you spoke out not against it. Now, this guy's also a Christian. And he was so adamantly opposed to Donald Trump that he basically was saying, even if it took corruption and fraud to make sure this man didn't get into the White House. Well, now, wait a minute. This guy is way outside of his proper instruction. And when you have evidence that you've got a teacher that is going bonkers, and you can deal with that individual teacher quite well. At the University of California, Riverside, you have to sign a paper when you go into the classroom saying that you won't take any video, you won't take any audio of what's going in the classroom, because if you do, you'll be denied a diploma. What? I thought to myself, wow, I don't need a diploma. I would like to get into that classroom and just audio tape everything that this Marxist is saying. And if he's stepping outside, remember, every public school teacher takes an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, that's 24/7 all the time. When you're a government official, you have to obey your oath. You may despise the Constitution of the United States, then go get a job in the private sector because you're under obligation to defend the Constitution of the United States. So if you've got any teacher anywhere speaking out against the Constitution of the United States, all you need to have is a witness. A seventh grade student could be an adequate witness to what the teacher is saying in the classroom. Then I'm sorry. If you can't even talk against the Constitution on the weekend, you are 24/7, 365 days a year accountable to the oath of office. So yes, we can deal with school board members, we can deal with teachers, people who are teaching anything that basically erodes the fabric of the American family. We're talking about in the Declaration of Independence, those very cherished words, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Well, what's more important to a culture than the establishment of stable families? So using the process, which we call the power of paper, we can force government officials back inside the box of the Constitution. And that goes for public school teachers as well.
Okay, so you were in the state of California, so I'm assuming that you probably run up against maybe, well, I guess all the states are facing this now, but my understanding is that California faces a lot of this. I worship with a family that recently moved to Alabama from California, and they said we stayed there a while. We have 4 children, and some of them were in school, and it began to get very difficult to find out what was going on at school. It was difficult for them to figure out. They began to hear things that were happening at the school that they didn't agree with, and they finally said, "We just have to go somewhere else. We can't stay here." Can you talk a little bit about California itself? Is that what you're experiencing? Is that what you're fighting against there in California?
Absolutely. But I hasten to point out that there are 58 counties in California, and over 40 of those counties have sheriffs like ours, who basically tells the governor, who's a leftist, Gavin Newsom, take a hike. I'm not enforcing your mandates in this county because I took an oath of office to the Constitution, not to the Democratic Party or to you. You're not my boss. The beautiful thing about sheriffs is they're accountable to the people. They're elected out here every 4 years. And we have a sheriff who basically said, I'm not enforcing these mandates. You think I'm going to go into churches and count the number of people in there or whether they're wearing masks? And Governor Newsom actually wanted churches to stop singing on Sunday morning because it might be spreading the virus more. Well, our sheriff said, forget that nonsense. We're not going to do that. But you see, you have other government officials that hop on board real quickly. And we had a chief medical officer who sent his minions out into the highways and byways telling all the restaurants they needed to close down and threatened to fine them. Well, for most of the restaurants, they complied. A few didn't. We found out about what was going on, and we used the power of paper, and we got that chief medical officer eventually to resign because we found out he was violating federal laws. And when we sent him an affidavit, and an affidavit is simply a notarized statement of facts that can be taken into a courtroom. When we sent him the affidavit, he didn't respond. So my mentors, Jack and Margie Flynn, basically told me what to do next. We put the affidavit into an envelope along with another affidavit, this one made out to each of the 5 supervisors who were this medical officer's boss. Now we're telling them, hey, you've got this hireling down there who's violating federal laws. You have a responsibility to deal with him, and we're giving you 30 days to rebut the contents of our affidavit. Otherwise, everything against you can be used in a court of law. Well, a quick response to that was that within about 6 months, that guy was gone. A chief medical officer resigned and moved out of the state. So it worked, and it has worked 4 other times for me. And what I'm just trying to get people to do and understand, this isn't rocket science. This is a pretty straightforward process. And if we, the people, the United States, would start using this against government, we can hold them accountable to their oath of office, and we can get them to repent. That's all we want. We just want them to stop doing that.
So, what kind of things can someone, let's say someone's listening, and what kinds of things can you do in terms of with these affidavits? It seems that you would need to have a pretty good understanding of the law before knowing. But you say it's not rocket science. So, can you kind of talk about the kinds of things that someone that's a
Sure.
citizen can
Yeah.
look at and say, okay, this is not right. I'm going to get an affidavit.
Right. I want to mention right now, Jerry, that at the end of this presentation, I'm going to make a free gift to the listeners so
Sure.
they can get a copy of the template that we use. The affidavit has an initial paragraph that basically the purpose is to point out to the recipient, whether it's a government official, or whether it's a corporate official, that they have a responsibility to answer. You can't tell us to go talk to an attorney. We're talking to you. You wanted the job, whether you're a legislator, a law enforcement agent, or a judge. You wanted the job. This is part of your description. You have to answer this affidavit. The final paragraph spells out to them that if you don't rebut this within 30 days, everything in it can be used against you personally in any court in America. And the court that I like to use is something called small claims court. I don't have to take you to Superior Court. I'll pull you into small claims court. It'll cost me $50 to have you come down here. So yeah, it's a pretty simple process. Now every affidavit has that initial paragraph and that final paragraph, but in the middle is the body. What exactly is taking place here? What violations of the Constitution are taking place here? And if you can find actual statutes that they're violating, it's even more powerful because it gets really specific. And that's what we did with the case with the medical officer. We found out that, and this is a problem across the country, I don't know of any county, city, state that followed the law. The law says specifically in order to have these kind of mandates, whether it's social distancing, quarantining, or even, God forbid, vaccination, you have to have independent review boards set up, made up of people who share no monetary interest in the outcome. Nobody did that. California didn't do that. Our county didn't do that. So when we put that on in the affidavit body, we spelled out to them exactly where in the Code of Federal Regulations they're violating federal laws. That's pretty powerful. And it was interesting that when I sent my affidavit to my supervisor, I had other people send affidavits to theirs. It's the only time my supervisor ever called me up personally, and he was not happy. He did not like having his name on that. And we had a spirited discussion, and he finally just got upset and hung up. But basically, within a few months, that medical officer was gone. He resigned. And that's all. We just want people to stop doing what is wrong. And if you can't stop yourself, I guess you need to resign.
Yeah, that would make sense. So can you talk a little bit about some of those other wins that you've had
Absolutely, yeah.
so that people can kind of get a sense of the kinds of things
Yeah.
that can be done?
Okay, well, I always admit in every one of these podcasts that I'm a recidivist. I'm a recidivist, Jerry, when it
Okay.
comes to rolling stops with an automobile. I just can't stop not stopping. I just keep going. I slow down, I look both ways, and there's nobody around, and then my wheels don't come to a total stop. And I notice everybody seems to do that, but I'm the one who gets the tickets. So it started in Colorado 40 years ago when I got my first one, 2 o'clock in the morning, nobody around, but the cop's hiding somewhere, and he gave me a ticket. Well, that started the curiosity in my brain. I mean, I'm not hurting anybody, and where does the money go? The guy who's writing the tickets in the government, and the government keeps the money. It seemed like a conflict of interest to me. But I paid the fine, and I went on, and I moved to California, and now I'm starting to get them more often. California is they like to enforce the vehicle code a little more than, say, Colorado. So I got several more out here. And I'd always go to court and I would argue. I always felt like this isn't right. And I would try this technique or that technique, and I didn't get anywhere. And I did something stupid. I got mad one time and said, I'm not paying it. I'm not going to pay the fine. So what happens? They suspend your license and then now get another ticket, and you'll find out it's not an infraction anymore. Now it's a misdemeanor, and I'm in there defending myself against a misdemeanor. It means I could go to jail. So here's an important thing. I learned law by doing law. I went to law school for a while, but I wasn't learning what I wanted to learn. So when I go to court, I make my points, and I always learn something when I go. And I objected to something that the district attorney said. And by the way, the people listening to this, you don't have to worry about going to court where you might go to jail. Generally speaking, that's not the situation most people are going to find themselves in. You're going to find yourself in a situation where the government's telling you to do something. You didn't actually hurt somebody. If you hurt somebody, that's a different story. But most of the time, especially in California, it's really easy to find yourself as a defendant in a case where you didn't hurt anybody. Well, in these situations, you can usually take care of everything with paper. You're not going to have to go to court. You're going to lay things out. But I was in court. I made my point, and the judge says, hold on, you're going to have to explain that to me. So I started to explain, and he let me go for a while, and then he said, stop right there. Mr. Beck, you've made some very good points here today, but that's not why we're here today. You should have brought that up with a pre-trial motion. And that is critically important if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're defending yourself in a misdemeanor case. And the situation there is it's important that you establish the proper jurisdiction in the courtroom. I don't want to get too far ahead. I just want to get back to my win. So I learned this process because I got in touch with Jack and Margie Flynn, and they taught me the process of what we call the power of paper. So when I got another one of these rolling stop tickets, I put my affidavit together. In the first paragraph, I explained the responsibility to answer. In the middle paragraphs, I specifically pointed out two actions that the police officer took that are against the law. The police officers violate the law all the time. They don't know it because we, the people, don't hold them accountable to know it. So I put into my affidavit specifically, one, I'm in my automobile. I'm not in a motor vehicle. I'm traveling to the store. I'm not in commerce. The code of the DMV code, the driving manual, is all commercial. Driving is a privilege. Traveling is a right. So I pointed that out. The second thing I pointed out to him was we have a court decision in California. It's probably got similar throughout the country. It's called the Sava decision. And in that decision, the court basically said, since traffic violations are not crimes, they are but infractions. They're infractions because you do not get a jury trial. Don't get a jury trial. So it's an infraction. But wait a minute. The law says that a law enforcement agent can only arrest a person if he's serving a warrant, he's acting on a verified complaint by an American citizen, or he's just witnessed a crime. Technicality is infraction's not a crime. We have a Supreme Court ruling say it's not a crime. So you made a false arrest, and that's what I put in my affidavit. You're the one who made a false arrest. I don't want to make any big deal out of it, but if we're going to go to court, it's going to come out then. So when I went to court and I took a witness with me, always take a witness, the deputy sheriff walked in and he gave a piece of paper to the bailiff. The bailiff gave it to the judge. And 2 minutes later, the judge was, Mr. Beck, are you here? Oh, Mr. Beck, you can go home because the case has been dropped. Now, when I had this situation, the first thing I did is I followed Jack and Margie's Christian perspective. Write the deputy sheriff just a letter explaining to him what he did wrong. So you don't have to up it to an affidavit. The deputy sheriff chose not to answer. So that means I'm going to have to send the affidavit. Everything I send by certified mail. So I get the little green card back that tells me he got it. Pretty important that you prove to the judge that he was properly served. So the deputy got the affidavit, and I'm sure he has to sign for this. What's he gonna do? Is he's just gonna throw that in the trash? This an affidavit's got his name on it, and I'm telling him it can be used against him in a court of law, and I'm calling him out for false arrest. Now it might interest your viewers that I always ask, how many of you have ever been arrested? 95% of the people, I've never been arrested. How about, have you ever been stopped by a police officer on the street because of traffic violation? Oh yeah, I've had one of those. Well, according to the code, you have been arrested. So almost all Americans have been arrested. So the deputy sheriff probably sent the affidavit upstairs to an attorney, and the attorney came back and said, I'll let him go. I'm pretty sure the attorney didn't say, he's got us. He knows the law. No, I don't think he would say that to a deputy sheriff. He'd probably just tell him, let him go. And one thing I've found out, Jerry, is when you win, you'll never find out why you won. They'll never tell you, hey, you really got. No, they'll never do that. All you know is that you won. And that's the critically important thing. I've learned by my losses, but I've been inspired by my wins. And when I walked out of that courtroom that day, I was of the mind the Flynns are right. When the Flynns said over the course of 6 decades, they have over 10,000 wins, I believe them now because I see how simple it was. It cost me $9 twice to send certified mailings to a deputy sheriff. That fine, which is the lowest fine value that you can get in California, was $240. It was worth the battle. Monetarily, it was worth the battle.
Okay,
so that was my first win.
Okay, so that was the very first win. And so are there other wins that are maybe associated? I assume they weren't all traffic stops that you.
No, that was only one traffic stop.
Okay.
By the way, as far as traffic stops go, one of the first things that you want to do in what they call due process is to notify your adversary. Now, in the case of the traffic stop, I notified him after the problem arose. But what I've since done is I'm notifying my potential adversaries in advance. So that if I'm stopped by a police officer for one of these infractions, I will give him my driver's license, I will give him my proof of insurance, but then I will give him an affidavit made out to his boss, whether it's the police chief, whether it's the sheriff, or whether it's the highway patrol. I've sent affidavits to all of them so that if they're going to consider giving me a ticket, I'm going to present them something where it says right here, these aspects of law, and it's made out to his boss. His boss is going to be on the line if he steps across the line and does something that's wrong. Now, this has gotten me out of 3 potential no rolling stops. just some encounter with a police officer once when I was sleeping in my car waiting for my wife to come down from a piano lesson. And I was questioned as to what I'm doing there. I guess I'd parked slightly across the no parking zone. And she took my material back to her car and came back 2 minutes later and gave it to me and said, hey, Mr. Beck, have a nice day. So I'm in their computer that this is a guy who knows the law. They don't say that. They just simply say, don't cite, don't detain, don't impound. That's in the computer. Now, police officers have told me, yeah, we got a few people like that. We don't know why it's in the computer. We just let them go. That's all I want. Because I don't speed. I don't drink. So I'm never a threat to anybody because I'm drinking and driving. I'm a very, very careful traveler. Okay, so let's go to another COVID case. I went into Best Buy and Best Buy said I had to put on a mask. No, I don't have to put on a mask. Yes, you have to put on a mask. It's a law. No, it's not a law. It's the governor's mandate, and I have a right to come into your store. No, you have to have a mask. All right. So I went home. I put an affidavit together. In this case, because it's a corporate official, I have to travel 50 miles to Glendale and put it into their process server. So, but what did I do? I sued them in small claims court. California, I don't know about other states, but California is a pretty nice place to live because you can sue people for in small claims court for discrimination. Okay, so we went to court, and Best Buy had to show up. Best Buy sent a store manager down to the courtroom, and people asked me, "Well, did you win?" Well, I wasn't trying. I think I sued for $100. I just wanted my money back. I wasn't trying to get a cash settlement. I wanted them to stop discriminating against me and everybody else by telling me we have to wear masks. I'd done enough study on masks to know that they're not going to stop a virus. So, the judge ruled against me, but that's okay because the judge doesn't know the law. She's used to just small claims bantering about who did what and when. So he's not used to being questioned about rules of the Constitution. But what I did do afterwards is that I did send her an affidavit and explain to her why, if you don't rebut what's in it, if you're ever on a case again, I'll have to ask you to step down because you obviously don't honor your oath. She didn't rebut it, so that's on the record. As for Best Buy, within 2 months, all the masks were gone. I don't think my affidavit necessarily led a major corporation to stop having masks, but it didn't hurt. And the main thing was I forced Best Buy into court. I live by several mottos. One of them is this: what would the world be like if everybody's doing what I'm doing? Gosh, if even 1/10 of 1% of the people are doing what I'm doing, I think government could be controlled very easily. It doesn't take a lot of people using this method in order to control government. I also went to my assemblywoman and my senator, my state senator, and I take witnesses with me. And I asked both of them, according to the Declaration of Independence, what is the purpose of government? Now, you would think somebody who's been in government for 8 years would know what the purpose of government was, but they're always wrong. They always say it's to protect the people. Well, I'm quick to point out if a burglar comes into my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't think the cops are going to be able to help me. I have to be able to protect myself. What I want you to do is if I have to use physical force or a gun in order to protect my family, I don't expect you to haul me into court because you've passed some statute that says that I violated I violated the statute by using my gun to protect myself. Your job, according to the Declaration of Independence, is, because the Declaration has these hallowed words: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Next sentence, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That's it. That's the job description. You are to pass laws that safeguard my rights. 6 months later, she was sponsoring a bill that would put my pastor in jail for simply counseling someone with sexual dysphoria. She's trying to pass a statute that would violate the First Amendment, the right to speech, and the First Amendment, the right to one's religion, practice one's religion. That's my pastor's job, is to give counsel to people. Well, in the First Amendment, we also have petition for redress of grievances, which is power of paper. So we sent affidavits to her specifying exactly what she did wrong. And long story short, they pulled the bill. It never was signed into law. And what really made an impression upon me was that the next session, they passed a resolution, not a law, but a resolution, telling priests and pastors that they shouldn't be doing this. My assemblywoman didn't even sponsor the resolution. She was quiet. Now, she voted for it, but she didn't sponsor it. So it means that she's taking a step back. And that's what I think. Government officials are not used to having affidavits show up calling them out for their violation of oath of office and being held accountable, perhaps any court in America. That's the power of paper.
Okay, so you mentioned something there that is of an increasing there's increasing anxiety or fear about the government potentially telling preachers what they can preach about and what they can say from the Bible. And what you're saying is that that is all protected under the First Amendment. That when there are bills and laws passed, those are actually unconstitutional, and we have relatively simple ways to fight against that sort of thing.
Generally speaking, that's true. There's one caveat, one
Okay.
warning. If your church is 501c3, watch out. Watch out. If it's not 501c3, by all means, preach anything you want to preach.
Now, what would be the difference there? Why is the 501c3? Why is that relevant to this?
You're asking for a benefit from the government. That's thin ice. I moved from Colorado. Next door to Colorado is Nevada, or not Nevada, but Nebraska. And there was a small Christian school near the Iowa border that had started a Christian school. And the Christian church started a Christian school. And the state of Nevada was having a exodus of people, so the state legislature passed a law that said all the teachers have to be credentialed. Well, Pastor Sylvan said, I'm not going to do that. My church is under God's covering, not the state, so I'm going to ignore that. Well, he eventually got arrested. And he stood before a judge, and he started to make his case, and the judge stopped him and said, Pastor Sylvan, is your church 501c3? He said, yes. I said, Pastor, I guess you don't know, but everything in your church belongs to us. Wow. Shocking revelation. Now, this is hardly ever pulled out. I mean, only because Sylvan was pressing the issue so much. Most churches just simply, they just don't want to get political in the beginning. They don't want to get involved in politics. Partisan politics divides people. Look what's happening in our country today. So a lot of pastors would just simply not broach the subject, would just stay away from it. Well, if we got into the subject of apologetics later, I would say politics is critically important to proper apologetics. If you don't have much to say about what's going on in your country, and all you've got to talk about is heaven, I think you're going to have a lot of people not listen to you. But when you have answers to the world's problems, you'll get an audience. They might be hostile, but they'll be willing to listen to you. That's another topic, of course.
Yeah. So I want to get to apologetics in a second, but I have a sister in Alabama who is a public school teacher, and uh, for one of the things for her is that they want them to teach. She actually teaches like English language arts, but sometimes they will move the teachers around to teach other subjects as well. And so when it comes to science, they would like her to teach evolution, and she does not believe in evolution. Of course, she's a believer. So um, is there something legally there that she can that she would have access to, or is you just basically have to tell the kids whatever the schools tell you to teach the kids?
Well, see, Alabama's a nice place to be
Okay.
because all she has to do is have one of her students ask her about creation, and now she can talk.
Okay.
That's it all.
So
But
so it's
she's got to write
basically
when the kid asks a question, especially if the kid could come up with something like this is a good one. Um, do you know anything about polystrates? Jerry, you know what a polystrate is?
well, it's multiple strata of a fossil, I believe is
Yes,
what
but
that's
not,
referring
most
to.
people don't know that. Well,
Uh-huh.
you can go to Grand Canyon and you could hear some evolutionists talk about how this level came this many million years later, and then this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. That's the evolutionist theory. Over here, you got a polystrate that goes through all of them. They were not laid down over millions of years. They had to be
Right.
laid down over maybe a few weeks to months. They're buried rapidly. That's the only way it could have happened. So, look, uh, all you need is the opportunity from a student to bring up something like polystrates. In the next 15 minutes, you can talk about polystrates.
And
And
so you can
I dare say the principal better not come in there and tell you not to do that. Then you're going to go after the principal.
and that's where you could use the power of paper.
Oh, yes. Only, look, I often wonder, gee whiz, if I wanted to retire early and I'm in the public schools, and I were in a school district that was woke, I would just take very good notes of what's happening all the time, and then I would eventually step across the line. They would sanction me. I've already got my attorney lined up, and 6 months later, I'm going to be able to retire.
Mhm.
I'll start my own Christian school with $2.5 million
Oh
because
wow.
that's you're infringing upon my rights. I have a right. I don't stop being a Christian when I come into your school, and I'll lay my facts against your facts any day of the week. Polystrates refutes the long eras in between the deposition of these strata. Can't have happened.
Yeah, so that's one of the three questions that you mentioned that evolutionists can't answer. Can you talk a little bit about the other couple of questions there that are related to this?
Well, the first one is, where did matter come from? Christians can't answer that scientifically. Evolutionists can't answer it scientifically. Theirs is a matter of faith. Ours is a matter of faith. Our faith is based upon the Bible, a credible source. I don't know what their basis is. I couldn't begin to tell you where, where anybody would say, they've got a credible witness. Neither one of us were there when it started, so we can't even speculate. I can simply say the Bible says God said, and it was so. The second one is, how could life come from non-life? Man has been trying to do that in labs for decades, and they can't do it. Nobody else would have accomplished that. Frankenstein was a movie. It wasn't real. I mean, they can't turn life from inert matter. And then the third one goes along with the polystrates, is that where's the missing links? Goodness sakes, there's a big difference between an ape and a man. There's a lot in between. And by the way, Charles Darwin was a racist to the core. I was shocked when I found in Origin of the Species, Charles Darwin actually said he looked forward to the day when the black race was gone. Oh no, he said basically that the black race was part of the missing link from the monkey. Come on. How can this guy even be considered a source when he's so blatantly racist?
Yeah.
But that was so you want to bring this guy into your classroom? Wait a minute. I think we got a problem with racism now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you read on the Origin of Species, he mentions black people as being savages and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so it's actually pretty startling if you haven't read it before. So
Yeah.
I know there are some people that I have quite a few atheists that watch the podcast. So sometimes when I bring up Darwin, they kind of say, well, we've kind of moved on from Darwin. But I mean, when you look at ultimately, maybe some people have moved on from Darwin, but there are plenty of people who haven't. And so I think those who distance themselves is because of some of the racism and stuff like that. Now, you mentioned something in your profile, or I think in your one of the messages to me, about how you have seen in other countries how the use of a biblical worldview has actually helped test scores rise. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, that's right. Bruce Malone came to Riverside, and I had a chance to meet him. I had no idea what his goal was, but he's written all these wonderful daily devotionals based upon science. He'll have a devotional about butterfly or caterpillar or something, and he'll point out the tremendous amount of design that goes into even some of the lower creatures on the planet, spiders and things like that. He puts them into these daily devotionals, and he's gone to Fiji, the nation of Fiji, and they allow him to come in and do creation seminars, and then he gives all the books away to the kids, thousands, about tens of thousands of these books. And after a year, 2 years, Fiji government was calling back and saying, we want you to come back. You didn't reach all of our students, and we found a profound difference between the reading and science scores in the schools that you've been to versus the schools you haven't been to. So here's a government that's basically saying, get in here, we need you. Now they're doing the same thing in Peru. Peru wants them in. So the word kind of spreads around to different countries that aren't so hostile to the biblical worldview. They just want their kids to learn. And these books have inspired the students to love to read. The reading scores are way up, and the science scores are way up. And that's happening in Fiji and now in Peru. It could happen in any state in the United States. You can start bringing these guys in here the same way. Hey, you know what? It's a convocation. You don't want to come, you can stay in the classroom and in new study hall, or you can go down here. But quite frankly, what we're presenting to the students is another theory. I cannot prove that God created a caterpillar. It just can't be proven. But we can look at the facts. This is an extremely intricate creation. How did it possibly have happened? We have 17 different systems inside our body: the digestive system, the neurological system. All of those had to come together exactly the same time. It's not possible. I mean, from a mathematical point of view, it's just an impossibility. So we can always say, well, what's the likelihood of it? No likelihood of it happening that way at all. Well, God, yeah, I guess if God exists, he could do almost anything. He sent his son, and his son walked on water.
Okay, so that's when you were thinking about the including a biblical worldview in our education systems, you're saying that that's something that could be done on the state and local levels now, and we would then see an improvement in our students. That's always interesting because I agree. I have a friend who's in education who's working towards something similar there. But I often, again, come across people who are atheists that say, well, the only reason why this Christian religion continues to proliferate is because people keep teaching their kids this stuff. And they would say, well, we really need to fight against that. And so there is an opposition as well of people that are saying you shouldn't be allowed to teach your children this worldview, that they are very much opposed to this.
And I actually agree with that. So let's just do away with public schools. We won't have any more. And you atheistic guys can go over there and have your schools, and then we'll have our Christian schools over here. And I don't think you're going to like the results, because our homeschoolers are crushing the public schools. Homeschoolers, especially with the curriculum that we got now, when my kids were going through, my youngest son is 31. So this is a long time ago. I didn't have the options you have now. I mean, I look at what's available to people now. My, so much more available, and it's very. Of course, mothers have to be at home. Somebody has to be at home. That's the biggest problem, is that moms are out working. But well, we got 9-10% of the American population that's looking at homeschool. That's wonderful. As Dewey said, and the atheists should agree with me because Dewey was an atheist, all education is inherently religious. So why do I have to pay for your religion? You want a religion that teaches that Jesus Christ is irrelevant. And we're not going to bring him into the courtroom ever, into the classroom at all. So we got a problem. And I see a philosophical problem here. And the only way you can deal with it is that we're going to have to shut down all the public schools. Otherwise, we're going to have this clash constantly.
Right. Well, yeah. So that's and I'm sure that's an entire legal issue as well, I guess, because we have Department of Education and stuff like that. You're saying that potentially that would be something to completely do away with.
Well, that's what Vivek Ramaswamy says.
Uh-huh.
The first thing that's going to go is going to be the Department of Education.
Okay. Well, we'll again certainly need to have our families built up and in a position to be able to educate our children ourselves
Well,
moving forward. That will be important.
we did that very well before the Department of Education came into existence.
Yeah.
It should be a state's issue. If the states want to have a public school system, That's another question. But the federal government has no reason to be involved in it at all, because the Constitution are limitations upon the federal government. And there's nothing in there about education. That's a states' rights issue.
Okay, well, we're just about out of time, so I've got a final four questions that I ask each guest that I wanted to put to you as we're ending today. The first question is: do you have a recommended book, something that other than the Bible or one of your books that you currently are recommending to other people? Looks like you've got it
Yeah,
there with you.
I highly recommend The History of the American Constitution or Common Law. The History of the American Constitution or Common Law. And this is an excellent book on the common law, which we didn't really talk about too much, but it's a jurisdictional issue, and we have to get back to getting the courts into common law status as opposed to statutory jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is where the battle has to be won in the courtroom. If you go into the courtroom and you start arguing the Constitution, the judge is going to shut you down, and you're going to walk away upset thinking that the Constitution doesn't have any purpose anymore in the courts. That's not true. You should have brought it up in a pretrial motion. That's our problem. That's we keep doing it wrong. That's very clear in this book, what we have to do.
Okay. So that would explain some of what you're talking about there,
Yeah,
where you can find the right courts to be in and that kind of thing, so that you can appeal to the Constitution rather than what these other courts are appealing to.
right. At least
Okay.
I've made it clear to people that if you are losing in the courtroom, it's because of jurisdiction. Believe me, the Constitution still has teeth, but it's got to be applied properly because the other side has done Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence. He, speaking of the king, has combined with others, speaking of Parliament, to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. There it is. Subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. Constitution is talking about there is not the United States Constitution. That came 11 years later. He's talking about English common law. And then he goes on to write, and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to, here it comes, acts of pretended legislation. 90% of this stuff that's coming out of our legislatures today is pretended legislation. It's not common law. It's telling you what to do. My common law tells me not to do anything bad to anybody else, and I can do anything else I want to do. I can't pollute the stream. Somebody downstream is going to make a complaint, and then I've got to answer for it. But if there's no victim, there's no crime. And if there's no crime, I don't belong in your courtroom.
Okay. That's fundamentally different than what many people how many people view the way the law works. And so it's a good way to it's a good reminder for us, because I know we generally think in terms of crimes. Well, what you're describing is something like, so for example, if you've ever been in a Bible class, or you ever heard a preacher basically talk about going, is it a sin to go 1 mile per hour over the speed limit, or some of the things that you've been discussing, it gets back to this
Pretended
fundamental
legislation.
misunderstanding of what law is, or at
Yeah.
least American law or common
Right.
law is.
Yeah.
Oh,
We agree too easily to statutes. Statutes are not laws unless they're constitutional. It has to be constitutional.
right.
But if you ask the court, what jurisdiction, and they'll say you're in statutory jurisdiction. I don't want to be there. I want to be under the
Right.
common law.
That's right. Don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is: do you have an interesting quote or scripture that you'd like to share?
Yes, it's Colossians 4:6. That your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you know how to answer every man. That's our job. When somebody asks us a question, we have to give them an answer. I might have to say, I don't have the answer to that. I'll have to go home and get it for you, but I've got a job to do. We have a problem in the country. It's our job to come up with the solution. We can't just simply go to church on Sunday morning and sing our songs and then go back to the ways. No, there's injustice in the world, and we need to stand against injustice. One of the key ideas of common law is to treat all men like your brothers and sisters. To police officers, I often ask them, if a man's coming at you with a club or a knife, what are you going to do? And they're going to say, I'm going to put him down. You're going to shoot him. He's coming at me with a club or a knife, he's going to go down. My response to them is, what if that person coming at you is not a stranger? It's actually your own son. Now are you going to shoot him right in the gut, make sure he doesn't get up? Or are you going to figure out another way to try and disarm him? Or to another cop, I said, there's two people over there that are mugging a woman, and you're down the sidewalk. What are you going to do? The cop said, knowing what the law is today, I'd just keep walking. I said, okay, let me change it. That woman over there is your mother. Now what are you going to do? See, it changes everything when you treat your stranger like he's your brother. And that's how we're supposed to live down here. So when the government goes after somebody who's a pro-lifer on the street corner, just simply talking to people about Jesus and about how much Jesus loves you, and the government comes after her, guess what? The government came after all of us. And we have a responsibility to stand with her. And I tell you, when we do, they will back off so fast. They don't want to have a battle with all of us. They want to pick us off one at a time. Under common law, we have a responsibility to look after each other.
Okay. So we want, and when we do that, we have our speech seasoned with salt. And you basically were referring to, how Christ says that we should love our neighbor as ourselves,
Exactly.
and look at people like brothers and sisters and treat them that way rather than strangers.
Wouldn't the world be great?
Yeah. Okay. Question 3 is there something that you believe that most other people don't? You have an unconventional belief you want to share?
Well, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of those. Unconventional belief. I know it's going to come to me, but basically, I would simply say that the Constitution has within it an enforcement agency called the Petition Redress of Grievances. Most Americans would say you can't fight City Hall, or the government's too big, or we're in the last days and it's just got to get worse. It's getting worse because we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be laying down our lives for the truth. So I would say that's my unconventional belief, is we have a responsibility to fight injustice, and we can do it using the law.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think most people even know that that's possible, much
Right.
less believe that. Okay. Last question: is there a piece of wisdom? You said you had children. Is there a piece of wisdom? If you had one piece of wisdom to leave behind for your family, what would that be?
Don't look for a Christianity that's comfortable. I hear people say, I go to that church because I'm comfortable there.
Hmm.
The apostles were never comfortable. They, all but one of them, gave their life for the truth. And when we are willing to die for the truth, we will truly live. So that's my word.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. So, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I have a gift, the template for the affidavit.
Hmm.
I want you to go to affidavitsecrets.com / let's go with faith. Affidavit Secrets / affidavitsecrets.com / faith. And you'll be able to get in touch with me there. The other place you want to go is remedyatlaw.us. That's my website also. And that specifically has a course that I offer. If you go to the Affidavit Secrets, you'll be able to get that course at 50% off. But the course is specific. It tells you exactly what's going to be in the course. And then it also has a wonderful 5-minute video by my friend Jerry, who really does an outstanding job of explaining the affidavit in 5 minutes.
Okay. So
That's it.
they can get in touch with you through affidavitsecrets.com/faith or
Yeah,
remedyatlaw.us. Is that
right.
correct?
Yes. And
Okay.
I hope I'll come back on sometime so we can talk apologetics.
Yeah, we got to a little bit of apologetics. We didn't get too deeply into that, but we got to talk about that, and so yeah, we'd like to go deeper into apologetics for sure. As I was telling you offline or in one of the messages, that's kind of the direction I've pivoted much more in the podcast. So, but I just want to say thank you for coming on. We really appreciate Kirk coming on with us today on the Faith Science Podcast. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep the faith. Thank you.
Amen.